Hello tankers and tankettes, time for another review. This time I've chosen to look at this thing, ARL 44, which I think is one of the most interesting tier 6 heavies, possibly one of the more interesting tanks on the French line. It's got some pretty un-French characteristics compared to the rest of the French heavies, and it's also got a pretty nice gun selection. Now, yes, what you're looking at right now is pretty much what you should have when you buy this thing first. I'm sure you've all seen, if you're at the right tiers, you've seen this stock thing, the stock house turret, and it's one of the more amusing stock turrets in the game. And I don't know what it is about Tier 6, but Tier 6 gets all the box tanks. You've got this with a stock turret, you've got a KV2 with a massive turret, you've got the SU-100Y, which is, the box tank. And of course you've got the TOG. So, yeah, you've got steel coffin, you've got the TOG, which is a bit of a limo, you've got, I don't know, I always think the KV2 looks like it's sporting a mini fridge. And yeah, so it gets better though. It does. So first off, take a quick rundown of some of the stats. 780 hit points with the stock turret. That goes up to 820 with the top turret. Top engine is 750. Your stock engine's not too bad, but the top engine's 750. That gives you a pretty good mobility. The speed limit's 37 km/h, which is, again for a heavy, that's all right. That, it feels like a fairly mobile machine when you've got those two in combination. Track traverse, turret traverse, nah, they're okay. It's a heavy tank. It's not going to be whizzing around that much, and view range is pretty standard for tier 6, 330 meters. You can't really complain about that. Yeah, so what makes this thing so un-French? Well, first off, it's got this 120 millimeters of armor, and it's 120 millimeters of sloped armor. So right away, there isn't any French tank that has, a heavy tank that's got a good frontal plate as that. And just for comparison, IS-3 has only got 110. So it's actually got better frontal armor than IS-3 on terms of, in terms of raw numbers. Obviously, the IS-3's got, an angled front plate as well, and it's got that pike nose. But even so, that's, if you're angling your tank, that's fairly bouncy armor. I'll actually just flash up on screen the armor thickness model, and you can have a look for yourself. And you'll note that the rest of the armor isn't too great. I mean, you can see the stats: sides and rear 50. Top turret is very soft; it's got 30, and yeah, you can. There's a bit of spaced armor on the sides here. Sides are really easy to pen. Your tracks will eat some shots because they're very prominent, obviously, and it's a bit like the Churchills. You can sort of poke your track around the corner, and you might keeps being shot in the tracks, but it won't do any actual damage to your tank. But yeah, people, if they know what they're doing, they will just shoot your turret because that is by far the weaker part of your armor. You can actually, it's got good gun depression, and you can actually go hull down fairly effectively, but it's not like the T-29. You can't just sit there with your turret poking out and taking the shots. You actually have to, poke over, take a shot, fall back. But you at least have the option of doing that. The French heavies are a bit weird because tier 5, well, tier 4 even. Yeah, the French get a tier 4 heavy, as I'm sure you've noticed. but they're a bit weird in that kind of tier 5 to tier 7 tier, this one, the tier 6 and the tier 7 especially, get pretty good gun depression, and then you get to the autoloaders and they've got no gun depression at all. um, but it's there and you can use it, and it's very useful. Now, possibly the more interesting thing is the gun selection. Now, this isn't actually the stock gun, this is the BDR gun, and you should have this. It's the top gun that's mountable on the stock turret, and it's actually 135 pen is not awful. It's about kind of, it's about the pen that tier 6 mediums have, but obviously you can't really play it like a medium in the stock configuration, so you just have to choose your targets carefully. And with premium shells, then if you've got a couple, I've actually got, for various reasons, I've actually got a big stock of the 90mm premiums, so I occasionally just tool around with the stock turret just for laughs, because I'm weird apparently. But yeah, it's not completely awful as stock guns go, but you really want to get up to that. Well, this one, the 90mm F3. I mean, the actual stock gun it's basically an American gun. If you've played any of the American mediums, even the American tank destroyers of that tier, you know this gun. It's not awful on a medium, but it's really low alpha. So yeah, use the DCA 30 until you get the F3. And this is actually a gun that stays useful and usable for as long as you've got the tank. And this is why I like this tank. It's actually got a genuine selection. You can put the gun on to suit your style, or even how you're feeling it, that you want to play at a given moment. And the F3 is a good all-rounder. It's decent rate of fire. It's a 90mm gun, same as the DCA 30. So it's same alpha, decent pen. 170 is only just a bit less than the KV-1S Top Gun. Aim time's not great, but it's better than either of these two. Yeah, so it's on the whole, it's not a bad gun. It's sort of reliable damage, and that's what the French guns are all about, really. Is they're not kind of high alpha, but it's kind of reliable, in terms of penetration and yeah, all that jazz. Next up is the 105mm, and this is actually the slowest firing. It's got the lowest rate of fire, slightly worse accuracy, and there we get hit with that horrible French aim time, 3.4 seconds. Slightly less penetration, but it's better alpha, so it's more of a, well, I wouldn't call it a brawling gun, but if you want to get more in people's faces, if you want to be more assured of doing some higher damage, then I would say go for this gun. But you can't, with that aim time, you don't want to sit and snipe with this thing. You have to be sort of medium to close range to use it effectively. And then lastly, you've got, now I'm going to have to scroll out for this. Yeah, the long 90mm, the DCA 45. And I see, I don't see a massive number of these things on the battlefield anyway, but when I do, I tend to see them with this gun. And I wouldn't use this gun, not at tier 6. Yes, the rate of fire is alright, the penetration is monstrous at tier 6. Accuracy is slightly better than the F3, but it's that same aim time, and the gun dispersion is just simply horrible. And bear in mind this is tier 6, so you can't get, you can get the gun lane drive, but you can't get the vertical stabilizers, which definitely help with that horrible aim time at the higher tiers. I mean, the AMX 5100 actually gets that same gun as an option, but obviously you can mount vertical stabilize on the AMX 5100. Although you'll know I don't actually yet, but that's because I'm saving up pennies. So yes, you can use it, and it's, like I said, it's reliable penetration, especially if you get punted into a match with tier 8 tanks. But on the whole, I would use one of these two for preference. So like I said, you get a genuine choice, and you compare it to that other well-known Tier 6 heavy, the KV-1S, there's pretty much only one usable gun on that tank, and everyone goes, oh, it's OP, but you take away that gun, and suddenly the KV-1S would become very underpowered indeed. Whereas this thing, it's whatever suits your playstyle, really. You can try and snipe with this, you can try and be a bit more in your face with the 105mm, or you can sort of go for the all-round of the F3, because 170 is pretty usable on a Tier 6 tank. So yeah, that's it for the stats, really. I'll do a as I've done in my last two videos, I'll do a quick intermission with a suggested upgrade path, and then we'll get on to some gameplay. So here we are. We're on Ruinberg. It's an encounter battle. It's not going to be anything spectacular. I'm not gonna, as a rule, use like really amazing replays for my review videos, just because, yeah, it's not maybe going to give you that representative a view of what a tank can do. And this one was an okay match. I got a bit off. Well, me speak good English. I got off a bit lightly. Oh, for goodness sake! I got off a bit lightly with the opposition. Their top tier platoon is 2 KV-1Ss and a Panzer IV-S, but I don't actually end up meeting them. And yeah, it wasn't the most testing battle, this, but it gives you an idea of you know, the bounciness of the armour, and well, as you'll see, I'm actually using the 105mm gun here, so it maybe give you a slight flavour of that particular weapon as well. But I tend to, you know, I should say I tend to sort of switch equally between this gun and the 90mm F3. Now that was a complete snapshot there, so of course it missed. At that range with this gun, that was incredibly unlikely to hit. So yeah, you can see the aim time there, it's not great. He's turning to look at me, so angles on my sides are showing less and my front is showing more. T1 Heavy's got a good rate of fire, and if he got my sides he could pen pretty easily, but that's him down. You kind of have to learn patience playing French tanks, and also the Soviet heavies, sort of tier 6 upwards as well, because they really have this same long aim time. So there we go, that top tier platoon is obviously in the city. I kind of went along to this this flank because it gives you more options. You can either push right, you know, all the way around to the A line and come up behind them, or you can push down the middle. So provided I'm, you know, if I'm a top tier heavy, sometimes I will go into the city though, but if it looks like there's a good, you know, number of tanks going in towards the cap in this, you know, particular case, I will often go up this way instead. I know I've been spotted and I know there's artillery, so I'm being slightly cautious here, but I do actually get quite a lucky shot on this Churchill. I don't know if someone else shot him first, or if that was just a particularly high damage roll, or I am eracting or something. I think someone else probably shot him first, because he had over 400 hit points left, so it doesn't seem that likely that I would have finished him off. But you can see it's not that many shots, nearly 1k damage, you know, not that far off 1k. And these are actually, it's kind of weird, these are all kind of snipey shots I'm taking. I've been saying don't use this gun as a sniper, but since 8.6 you can get away with the longer range shots. It's really the aim time that's the killer factor. So moving up a bit, I know one of their artillery was in town, bizarrely, so I'm a bit less concerned about arty now. This Hellcat is, you can see there, aim time, go. As you can see, I've you know, the T1 shot me a couple of times. I've not really faced any serious opposition though. This you know, the enemy team was not terribly good, or you know, whichever way it worked out, we were, you know, had the better players. But I just, you know, I chose this particular one because it gives you some idea of the armor can be bouncy. That one actually went into my, I think, into my sides, and it gives you, you know, some flavour of what this gun can do as well. And yes, the track's eating the shots nicely there. So there we go. 2k damage. That's pretty respectable. Didn't face that many enemies. It was a good spread across that team. Everyone had some kills pretty much. So yeah, sort of final thought time, I suppose. Like I said, good points about this tank are the guns and that frontal slope. You know, I actually, I think I mentioned before, I swap the guns around myself sometimes. Sometimes I play with the 105, sometimes the 90mm f3. Occasionally I even play with the DCA 45. I don't have a set play style for this tank in terms of the gun selection. I tend to think, right, what am I feeling like using today? And there's not that many tanks where you can do that. A lot of tanks, there is, you know, there is one, you know, there is one gun that you must use, and it's, you know, you have to adapt yourself to fit that gun. And to a certain extent, you have to adapt yourself to fit these guns, but there's several to choose from, and, you know, you can pick the one that suits you best. Unless you're, you know, like me, and you just use all three of them. Armor-wise, it's not great, but, you know, it's a French heavy. They're not known for their armor, and it's got better armor than, I think, pretty much most of them. Yeah, on the whole, I think the ARL's a bit underappreciated, and I think it's a bit overshadowed by the KV-1S, but I think that's true of the rest of the Tier 6 heavies as well. It's not a fault of the ARL particularly, it's just that the KV-1S with that 122mm gun, it gets all the glory, as it were. It's probably, you know, people see the stats for that thing and they go, ooh, and I suspect that's why you see a lot of them around. But, you know, a well-played KV-1S is a very dangerous tank. Even a badly played KV-1S can be a dangerous tank. So yeah, on the whole, I would say it's a bit atypical of the French heavies, but it's quite possibly one of the most enjoyable. And unlike the previous one, the BDR, the modules don't really carry over. The next one, the AMX M4, you basically carry most of the modules over, so it sets you up well for the next couple of heavies on the French line as well, in terms of not having to research, especially the guns. Would I recommend it to people? In of itself, yes, but I think you would have to want to try the rest of the French heavy line to, you know, make it worthwhile getting up to this thing, which is of course at Tier 6. And ultimately, of course, the French line, you get the auto-loaders, which are a whole different ball game. So yeah, if you enjoyed this, you can leave a comment, tell me what a pancake I am. You can like the video, you could even subscribe if you're feeling particularly generous, and of course, stay tuned for more.